everyone ignored her. Not just a glance here or a whisper there. She was invisible, a shadow sliding between the glittering elites of Seoul's most prestigious gala. The chandeliers reflected 1,000 lights, but none landed on her. Amara Dyke, the Nigerian-French art curator with a mind sharper than most in the room, moved like she belonged to a different world, a world that no one here cared to enter. And yet, tonight, her story was about to collide with a force no one saw coming. The crowd hummed with superficial excitement. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and laughter echoed hollowly across the marble floor. Guests flaunted designer gowns and tailored suits, exchanging nods and compliments that sounded more like transactions than warmth. Amid the spectacle, Amara's presence felt like a quiet challenge, an accusation almost that competence, grace, and intellect couldn't be measured by gowns or titles. The audience, paused for dramatic effect, didn't notice her, but she noticed everything. The subtle power plays, the whispered alliances, the unspoken rivalries, each tiny movement told a story no one else could read. And then she felt it, a gaze, not a glance, not a casual observation, a deliberate, calculated attention from the far side of the room. Her eyes met the faintest outline of a figure, tall, impeccable posture, an aura that radiated wealth and danger. Seo Kwon, though unknown to her, already calculated her presence. He was a man whose reputation whispered across the city like a cold wind. CEO, billionaire, untouchable and entirely unreadable. Why he watched her, Amara couldn't tell. But the feeling in her chest tightened, a curious mix of caution and anticipation. Amara's attention snapped to a small, cream-colored envelope resting on the velvet chair she had chosen. She hadn't seen anyone approach, yet there it was, tucked almost shyly, as if hiding from the opulence around it. No handwriting, no signature, just a subtle weight in her hand that hinted at importance. She hesitated. Was it an invitation? A warning? A trap? Comment below. Would you open it or leave it? Her fingers brushed the paper, and a ripple of unease danced down her spine. She looked up again. Seo Kwon was gone, or had he ever really been there? The whispers of the gala surged louder, yet she felt the weight of unseen eyes. Somewhere in the room, a plan was already in motion, a web spinning faster than she could follow. And the envelope in her hand, it was only the beginning. Because tonight, the invisible woman was about to be seen, and not everyone would survive the revelation. The envelope in Amara's hand felt heavier now, though she hadn't opened it. Her eyes kept flicking to the far side of the room, where the faint outline of a figure had returned. Or had he ever left? Seo Kwon emerged from the crowd with the quiet authority of someone who did not need permission to exist. Every step he took was deliberate, precise, impossible to ignore. The murmurs of the gala dimmed, replaced by a tension that hummed through the chandeliers. Everyone had overlooked her before, but tonight their indifference would shatter. Without hesitation, Seo extended his hand. The gesture, simple yet commanding, froze conversations in midair. Gasps rippled through the room. The socialites, influencers, and power players, all accustomed to controlling attention, suddenly became spectators. Amara's pulse quickened, a storm of indignation and exhilaration swirling inside her. In that instant, the woman invisible to the elite became the center of attention. This was the kind of power that could not be purchased or flaunted. It demanded acknowledgement. Recognition, whether she wanted it or not, had arrived. Amara's mind raced. Who was this man and why him? Billionaire, yes, but something about the precision in his movement, the controlled intensity in his eyes, unsettled her. Her instincts screamed caution, yet curiosity pulled her forward. Around them, whispers grew, eyes narrowed with judgment or envy, but she barely noticed. Sejin's gaze did not flinch. He saw her, not the gowns, the cameras, or the curated social facade, but her. The value in her presence that no one else recognized. Recognition that unnerved her because it cut through everything she thought she knew about these spaces. When her fingers finally met his, the room seemed to hold its breath. Cameras clicked, murmurs rose like a tide, and the chandeliers gleamed in sudden contrast. Their connection, though silent and brief, carried a weight far greater than either of them could yet understand. And the envelope in her other hand, a small, quiet anomaly amidst the grandeur, suddenly felt almost prophetic, a harbinger of secrets waiting to unfold, of dangers and opportunities that would define the night and perhaps much more. Seojin's grip was firm but measured, the kind of touch that suggested control without aggression. The crowd sensed it too, subtle shifts, a tremor of envy, curiosity, and fear rippling through their ranks. Some recoiled at the audacity, others whispered with barely contained excitement. And yet, Amara realized she felt none of the intimidation. For the first time, she understood that attention from the right person could transform invisibility into influence, dangerous, intoxicating influence. Then he leaned slightly closer, voice low and deliberate, barely above a whisper. "You weren't meant to be invisible tonight. But be careful. Being seen comes with consequences you cannot yet imagine." Amara's heart pounded. Consequences, danger, opportunity. And somewhere in the shadowed edges of the room, a presence shifted. Someone who had been watching, waiting, and whose intentions were anything but benign. The night had begun, and nothing, her life, her choices, or her carefully guarded ambitions, would ever be the same. Amara had barely recovered from the tremor of Seojin Kwan's whispered words when the gala's lights seemed sharper, colder, and somehow more judgmental. The envelope in her hand pressed against her palm, a silent weight of untold secrets, while the echo of Seojin's warning lingered in her mind. Being seen came with consequences she could not yet imagine. Every glance across the room carried unspoken calculations, alliances forming, intentions hidden behind practiced smiles. And for the first time, she realized the invisible world she had always navigated so carefully was colliding violently with the world of the elite. Seojin stood near the grand staircase, a quiet pillar of composed authority. To the untrained eye, he was simply a man of wealth and poise. But Amara now understood the subtle signals he sent, the way he scanned the crowd, the slight tilt of his head when he noticed movement, the faint tension in his jaw when whispers reached him. This was no ordinary CEO. There were layers, secrets hidden behind perfect composure, and she had for a fleeting moment become part of that puzzle, a puzzle that could either protect her or destroy everything she had worked for. Unable to resist, Amara finally eased open the envelope. Inside, she found a single card, a name, a time, and a cryptic instruction that made her heart skip. It was an invitation, yes, but one shadowed with caution, hinting at danger and opportunity in equal measure. A spark of curiosity mingled with fear, reminding her why she had come tonight, to secure her African-Korean art initiative, to carve a place for her vision where none existed before. Yet now, every ambition seemed entangled with unknown forces she could not yet see. The stakes had escalated far beyond a simple gala. As she pondered her next move, a figure approached from the side, a young aide with a discreet demeanor, someone who had observed Amara quietly, unnoticed by the rest of the gala. This was Ji-hyun, loyal to Seojin, who had a knack for reading rooms and people alike. In a whispered tone, Ji-hyun relayed a snippet of crucial information. Someone in the gala was orchestrating a subtle attack on Seojin's reputation, and by extension, anyone associated with him like Amara. For the first time, she realized she was not entirely alone. Allies existed in hidden corners, waiting to tip the balance. But trust would be everything. Amara's mind whirled. Every interaction she had witnessed tonight now seemed layered with intention, betrayal, and strategy. The laughter, the applause, even the smiles, all potentially masks. And yet, amidst the tension and uncertainty, she felt a surge of quiet pride. She had never been the type to rely on visibility. Yet here she was, caught in a whirlwind where her intelligence and resolve mattered more than appearances. But the emotional contrast was brutal. The exhilaration of recognition now clashed with the fear of exposure, of misstep, of being unprepared for the secrets about to unfold. Ji-hyun leaned closer, his voice a near whisper. "There's someone watching both of you. Someone who has plans for the gala tonight. And you, Amara, are part of them." A chill ran down her spine. The envelope, the whispered warning, the shifting crowd, everything was converging. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows of the chandelier-lit room, a presence waited for the perfect moment to strike. The night's surface had barely been scratched, yet the currents beneath were already pulling her toward a truth she was not ready to face. And in that moment, she knew with stark clarity, nothing in this world of opulence and power was accidental. The envelope still rested in Amara's clutch, its cryptic contents pressing on her thoughts like a heartbeat she could not ignore. Ji-hyun's warning lingered, sharp and deliberate. Someone was watching her, someone who had designs she could not yet comprehend. She glanced across the gala room, but the crowd seemed ordinary once more. Smiles polished, laughter rehearsed, glasses clinking without consequence. Yet beneath the surface, currents of intent shifted with every careful glance. The invisible thread tying her to Seo-jin Kwan had just grown taut, and danger was already pulling. It started innocuously enough, a fleeting touch between Amara and Seo-jin as they moved toward the balcony, unnoticed by them but visible to the eagle-eyed elite. Whispers arose, subtle but cutting. "Who is she? What does she want with him?" The words, delivered under breath, carried venom masked as curiosity. Suddenly, every gesture, every smile, every fleeting glance was twisted by assumption. In a single moment, Amara's careful navigation of the gala became a public performance of suspicion, her reputation threatened by nothing more than perception. The contrast stung. Once invisible, now scrutinized, her presence was a double-edged sword. Amara felt the weight of scrutiny as she excused herself to the balcony, the cool night air a sharp relief from the stifling tension indoors. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her pulse. Every fiber of her being demanded composure, yet her mind raced with the implications. Could she withstand this, the sudden shift from ignored to condemned? Seo-jin's gaze found her across the room, calm, unwavering, as if he alone could anchor the storm. And yet even he could not shield her from the subtle war of glances, whispers, and half-truths that had begun to circulate. Emotional contrast surged, the thrill of recognition clashing violently with the fear of misjudgment. The shadows along the edges of the terrace seemed to thicken. A figure lingered, watching, not one of the known gala attendees, but someone whose presence screamed hidden motives. Amara sensed it instinctively, the subtle shift in the air, the almost imperceptible tightening of her senses. Every detail from earlier, the envelope, Seo-jin's whispered warning, the young aide Ji-hyun's alert, was converging toward a revelation she could not yet grasp. She realized the stakes were no longer just about visibility or reputation. They were about survival within a web of social and personal intrigue. Inside the ballroom, the gossip swelled like a tide, fueled by whispered assumptions and the faintest flickers of envy. Amara could feel it, the silent calculation of each guest. Who could benefit if she stumbled? Who might gain from Seo-jin's attention being questioned? Even the most polished faces hid quiet ambition, and each one presented a potential obstacle, or an unexpected ally. The moral complexity of the evening became tangible. Every choice, every movement could alter the delicate balance of power. Just as Amara steadied herself, a shadow detached from the edge of the terrace. She did not recognize the figure, but the aura of control was unmistakable. A single voice, cold and deliberate, cut through the night air, just enough to reach her ears. "Miss Dyke, you're treading in a world far more dangerous than you realize." The words struck like ice. The envelope, the whispers, the hidden eyes, They were all part of something far bigger than a gala. And from the darkened balcony, she understood with chilling clarity. Someone had been waiting for this exact moment, someone whose patience had been measured, precise, and terrifying. Tonight, being seen had become a perilous gamble, and she had no idea how many were already playing against her. Amara's pulse had barely returned to normal from the chilling voice on the terrace when the envelope in her hand seemed to thrum with a quiet urgency. She could feel it now, not just as paper, but as a harbinger of truths she had not yet seen. The gala had shifted again, subtly, invisibly, but she sensed the undercurrent of danger brushing against every polished smile and rehearsed laugh. Seojin Kwon remained at the edge of her awareness, calm, composed, yet somehow distant, as though he too understood the gathering storm. And the shadowed figure from the terrace lingered in the edges of her mind, a dark silhouette of inevitability. Amara finally drew the envelope closer, unfolding the card inside with trembling hands. A single message, terse, precise, a meeting, a time, and a name she had only ever heard whispered. It suggested knowledge of Seojin's secrets, family betrayals, corporate rivalries, hidden alliances, and hinted that her presence at the gala was no accident. Every instinct screamed caution, but the pull of curiosity was stronger. She realized that the careful dance she had been performing all evening was about to collide violently with truths she might not survive unscathed. The crowd, oblivious to her turmoil, moved around her like water flowing past a rock. But for Amara, every glance, every half-smile, every gesture was loaded with implication. She could sense the web tightening, threads connecting allies, rivals, and the unseen observer who had made the terrace his post. Each movement, each whispered conversation, was a signal, a warning, and she had only begun to decipher it. Seojin approached again, the faintest smirk tracing his lips, but his eyes held something unspoken, an acknowledgement of danger, and perhaps a hint of admiration. He leaned close, just enough that only she could hear. Some truths are safer when hidden, but not all can remain that way. Amara felt the weight of his words, like a physical pressure. Could she trust him? Could anyone in this gilded, gossip-laden world be trusted? The gala, once merely a stage of visibility, had become a minefield of half-truths and concealed intentions. Every gesture she made could be misinterpreted. Every ally could conceal ulterior motives. The almost reveal loomed, knowledge that could undo reputations, destroy alliances, or worse, shatter lives. Her mind raced. The thrill of recognition, the intoxicating power of being seen, now collided with fear and moral calculation. Who was the shadow watching her from the edges? Who had orchestrated this subtle test? Amara had navigated invisible worlds before, but never one so layered with danger and artifice. Each step forward demanded precision, each choice a balance of survival and ambition. She felt the weight of her lineage, her intellect, and her vision pressing down. Every decision now mattered in ways she could scarcely measure. Even Seojin, for all his calm authority, could not shield her from the ramifications of exposure. She realized the stakes. Knowledge of secrets, even partial, was currency more dangerous than gold. And the moment to act, or to remain silent, was approaching faster than she had anticipated. The gala's music swelled, laughter floated through the chandeliers, and yet Amara felt the world narrow to a single, taut thread. A hand on her shoulder made her flinch. She turned, heart hammering, and froze. The envelope slipped from her grip, landing silently at her feet. Seojin was not there. The crowd was not responsible. The figure, lurking where shadows met light, now stepped forward into a sliver of brilliance. The face was familiar in a way that terrified her. A revelation she realized was imminent, one that could expose secrets long buried and pull her into a game where the rules were deadly and invisible. The night had begun innocuously. The evening had promised glamour. But in the hushed pause of the gala, Amara understood with sharp clarity. What was about to unfold could change everything, and some of it might be irreversible. Amara stared at the envelope now crumpled at her feet, the words inside still echoing like a threat. Someone had been orchestrating every moment of the gala, every glance, every whisper, with precision that unsettled her very core. The shadowed figure had vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind the chilling certainty that nothing here was accidental. Seojin's cryptic warning from earlier, truths that could not remain hidden, resonated like a drumbeat inside her chest. The evening had already begun to unravel, and Amara realized the subtle games of perception were about to escalate into something far more dangerous. The gala, now thick with whispered speculation, became a battlefield of veiled attacks. A rival socialite, previously cordial in her smiles, had begun subtly undermining Amara's credibility, hinting to the right people that the curator's African-Korean art initiative was a vanity project, a distraction rather than an achievement. Every polite nod, every sideways glance was a calculated attempt to destabilize her position in this elite world. Amara felt a surge of fury, the thrill of recognition from Seojin now intertwined with a burning desire for justice, not for revenge alone, but for acknowledgement of her value in a society that had ignored her for too long. She moved through the crowd with controlled precision, the envelope still heavy in her thoughts. Subtle gestures became her weapons, a strategically timed comment here, a quiet correction there, enough to reveal competence without arrogance. Slowly, the balance of power began to shift. Those who had assumed superiority found themselves watching, surprised, as the previously invisible woman commanded attention through intellect and poise rather than appearance or connections. The emotional contrast, the joy of influence clashing with the simmering rage of betrayal, energized her. Every observation she had made throughout the evening became a tool. Every whispered secret a potential advantage. Seojin reappeared, his presence a calm counterpoint to the storm around her. Yet, even he was caught in the tide of intrigue, forced to navigate his own rivals while keeping a careful eye on Amara. Their hands brushed in passing, a touch charged with understanding, caution, and attraction all at once. It was a silent acknowledgement that they were not merely surviving the gala, they were actively shaping it. And yet, the growing tension between trust and suspicion made every interaction precarious. Emotional stakes and romantic undertones wove together, creating a dance more dangerous than any of the whispered rivalries around them. Amara caught a movement from the corner of her eye, a familiar shadow slipping between the pillars of the ballroom. Someone observing, calculating. The figure's presence was subtle, but it carried menace, an invisible hand threatening to upend the fragile victories she had carved from the chaos of the night. The envelope's message seemed almost prophetic now. Her visibility had drawn attention she could neither fully anticipate nor control. Each step forward carried risk. Each strategic victory made her a target for those who thrived on sabotage and scandal. A sudden commotion near the grand staircase drew the crowd's eyes and Amara froze. A familiar rival, the very socialite who had whispered poison against her, had collapsed or been pushed. Chaos erupted, guests gasping, cameras flashing, and in the tumult, she spotted the shadowed figure again, closer, watching, deliberate. Seojin's expression tightened, and in that brief instant, Amara realized the stakes of visibility were far higher than she had imagined. Somewhere in the crowd, someone knew her secrets. Someone was orchestrating this evening like a chessboard, and she was merely a piece. And for the first time, Amara understood. Surviving the gala would require not just cunning and poise, but courage she had yet to summon. Amara barely had time to catch her breath. The chaos near the grand staircase, the rival's sudden collapse, the whispered panic in the crowd, the shadowed figure stalking the edges of the ballroom, had left her heart pounding. The envelope she had carried, now worn at the edges from constant handling, suddenly seemed more vital than ever. Tonight, every observation, every interaction, every subtle gesture was part of a much larger puzzle she had not yet seen. The gala had been a facade. Now it was a crucible, testing not just her poise, but her courage, her perception, and her capacity for calculated action. Finally, in the quiet of a side corridor, Amara unfolded the envelope fully. This time, she saw it clearly. Documents, photographs, and coded messages revealing the intricate web surrounding Seo Kwan's empire. Family betrayals, corporate rivalries, hidden alliances, and dark secrets long buried, all exposed in meticulous detail. Her breath caught. Every warning, every subtle threat during the gala suddenly made sense. And the truth about the shadowed figure, the observer lurking, patient and deliberate, was revealed. Someone who had access to Seojin's deepest secrets, someone who could manipulate events from the edges. The almost reveal had arrived. Amara felt the surge of power and dread in equal measure. Knowledge was intoxicating, yet terrifying. Every fact she now held could protect her or destroy her. The thrill of finally seeing the hidden layers of the world around her clashed violently with the fear of exposure, of misstep, of becoming a pawn in a far larger game. The envelope had shifted the balance. She was no longer just reacting, she could act. And yet, each move carried consequences. Each step risked drawing attention she might not survive. The emotional contrast was raw. Exhilaration mingled with the icy grip of fear. In the shadows, the familiar silhouette moved closer, stepping between columns so faintly that it might have been imagined. Amara knew better. The presence was deliberate, patient, and calculated. Someone had been monitoring her since the beginning of the evening, anticipating every glance, every hesitation, every detail from the gala. The whispers, the rivalries, the collapse near the staircase was orchestrated. She realized she had been observed, studied, and tested all at once. And now, armed with the knowledge in the envelope, she could see the game, but the player was still hidden. Seo appeared at her side, his presence grounding amid the storm. He glanced at the documents she held and nodded once, faintly, imperceptible to anyone else. The recognition in his eyes, acknowledgement of her intellect, her bravery, her resolve was a rare gift. Yet even he could not shield her from the consequences of action. Every ally was tested, every loyalty weighed, and every decision a potential turning point. Amara's mind worked furiously, weighing risk and reward, morality and survival, ambition and caution. For the first time, she realized the gala had been a proving ground, and she had passed, but the true test was only beginning. The corridor grew colder. The envelope trembled slightly in her grip, as though aware of the approaching storm. A subtle sound, a shift in the air, a step almost silent, warned her before the figure emerged fully from the shadows. Amara's eyes widened. Recognition struck like lightning. The observer was someone she thought she had known, someone whose allegiance she had assumed. But assumptions, she realized, were dangerous. A whisper, low and deliberate, floated from the darkness. "You've seen too much. Now the real game begins." Amara's heart slammed against her ribs. The gala, the envelope, the rivalries, the collapse, they were all prelude. And in that moment, she understood with chilling clarity. The web she had only glimpsed was far more intricate, far more perilous, and far closer than she had ever imagined. The night was no longer just a test of poise or intelligence. It was a battle for survival, and someone had just made their first move. Amara's pulse raced as the shadowed figure retreated into the edges of the corridor, leaving a cold, lingering tension in its wake. The envelope she now clutched contained not just secrets, but a roadmap, a map of alliances, betrayals, and power waiting to be seized. The gala's opulence, once a distraction, had become a battlefield. And Seo Kwan, ever the calm force at her side, reminded her silently that recognition alone would not survive tonight. Strategy would determine who emerged victorious. Every glance, every step, every word now mattered. Amara re-entered the ballroom with renewed purpose. The whispers that had followed her were no longer mere gossip. They were tools she could manipulate. She navigated the crowd with subtle precision, aligning herself with those whose influence could fortify her position while revealing cracks in the armor of her detractors. The once invisible woman now became a force, her intellect and poise commanding attention without arrogance. In a single evening, she had reversed status in ways few could perceive, leaving those who had ignored her to grapple with the sudden shift. Emotional contrast surged as exhilaration collided with the ever-present tension of exposure. Seo-jin moved through the crowd with her, his presence a calm counterbalance to the storm she was navigating. Their movements were almost choreographed, a silent understanding passing between them. Ji-hyun, the loyal aide, subtly guided them toward allies whose loyalty had not yet been tested, while simultaneously observing potential threats. Amara realized that this was more than social maneuvering. It was a delicate game of influence, a power play where one misstep could undo everything. And she was beginning to see that the true stakes extended far beyond the gala itself. This was a preview of battles that would shape reputations, fortunes, and legacies. Despite the apparent control, Amara's mind raced with tension. She had always been skilled at navigating invisible spaces, but tonight's gala demanded more than skill. It demanded courage, cunning, and a willingness to embrace moral ambiguity. Every ally had motives. Every smile could conceal betrayal. The thrill of dominance was tempered by the awareness that one wrong move could unravel her carefully constructed balance. Emotional contrasts, exhilaration, fear, and simmering indignation wove together into a delicate, high-stakes tension that tightened around her chest with every step. In a quiet alcove near the grand staircase, Amara observed the same shadow from the previous chapters, lurking where light and darkness met. Its presence reminded her that the envelope's revelations were only the beginning. Someone was orchestrating events from behind the scenes, testing her, probing her alliances, and predicting her moves. Each subtle gesture from the guests, each whisper, each fleeting glance could be part of a larger, unseen design. The stakes had escalated. What began as social maneuvering now teetered on the edge of danger. Seo-jin's hand brushed hers as he leaned close, voice low and deliberate. "They're watching us more closely than you realize, and one misstep could change everything." Before Amara could respond, the room went silent for a heartbeat, the unmistakable sound of a camera flash too deliberate, too sharp, cutting through the murmurs. From the far side of the ballroom, a figure she thought long gone had returned. Its eyes locked on her, calculating, patient, and aware. And in that instant, Amara understood with stark clarity. Tonight was no longer merely about influence or recognition. Tonight, the game had entered a new, perilous phase, one in which every secret, every alliance, and every misstep could have devastating consequences. The gala's glittering chandeliers no longer promised beauty or status. They reflected the danger that now loomed, waiting silently for the next move. The ballroom had grown tense, every whispered conversation carrying the weight of suspicion and ambition. Amara felt the electricity of anticipation in the air. The glittering chandeliers above now seemed to cast shadows sharper than light. The returning figure at the far end of the room had fixed its gaze on her, deliberate and unblinking, while the envelope in her hand pulsed with the weight of revelation. Tonight, the gala had shifted from a stage of visibility into a battlefield of power, secrets, and emotional stakes. And for the first time, Amara realized she held a weapon stronger than whispers: the truth. Amara moved with intention, each step measured, each gesture purposeful. She navigated past onlookers, past the subtle snide smiles and barely concealed envy, toward allies she had identified throughout the evening. Ji-hyun followed closely, guiding her with quiet competence, while Seo-jin remained nearby, an unspoken source of strength. The alliances she had cultivated, carefully, strategically, with intellect and observation, were now ready to shift the tide. The emotional contrast was palpable, the exhilaration of finally commanding attention, tempered by the lingering fear of betrayal from those who still lingered in shadows. With a subtle motion, Amara allowed the envelope to be seen by a few key players, releasing its contents strategically. Photographs, documents, and snippets of secret dealings circulated just enough to reveal the manipulations and deceptions that had been orchestrated against her and Seojin. Gasps, murmurs, and startled expressions rippled through the room. Those who had assumed superiority found themselves confronted with the truth, and for the first time, Amara felt the thrill of recognition merge with a righteous vindication. Status had reversed, but it was not arrogance that fueled it. It was justice, careful and deliberate, served at the perfect moment. Amara's heartbeat slowed, but not entirely. The room still held tension, but now it carried a new rhythm: respect, acknowledgement, and the undeniable weight of truth. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to feel pride not in beauty or connections, but in intellect, courage, and resilience. The contrast between invisibility and vindication was striking, a lesson in patience, observation, and timing. And yet, the shadow of the unknown observer lingered in her mind, a reminder that even in triumph, danger remained, waiting in silence for the next misstep. Seojin's eyes met hers across the crowd. The intensity in his gaze was a mixture of admiration, relief, and calculation. But Amara noticed something else, a subtle tension in his jaw, a quiet alertness that suggested he too had secrets yet to reveal. The envelope had shifted the balance of the night, but the game was far from over. Hidden observers, unspoken alliances, and unfinished strategies hinted that the evening's events were only a prelude to the challenges still to come. Emotional stakes and suspense mingled in the air, leaving every guest, every participant on edge. As the crowd began to absorb the revelations, a sudden hush fell over the room. A whisper floated from the far edge of the balcony, a name, a warning, a threat. "Amara, you've won a battle, but the war is only beginning." She froze. The shadowed figure from earlier had returned, now accompanied by another presence she had not anticipated. Both watched her with cold calculation, their intentions hidden but unmistakable in their menace. Seojin's hand brushed hers, a silent acknowledgement of danger yet to unfold. The room's glittering chandeliers seemed to mock the calm, a reminder that tonight every victory came with risk, and every secret revealed invited retribution. Amara understood clearly. Recognition, vindication, and even fleeting victory were only the surface. The deeper currents, power, revenge, and hidden truths, were still moving, and she had to decide carefully how to navigate the next wave. The ballroom held its breath. Every whispered reaction, every flashing camera, every deliberate movement felt magnified, almost unreal. Amara's pulse had steadied from the shock of revelation, but the envelope in her hand remained a reminder of unfinished business, a map of secrets, lies, and opportunities that had been carefully concealed until tonight. The shadowed figures from the balcony lingered, their presence a cold reminder that victory could be fleeting. Seojin Kwan's hand brushed hers, grounding her, and together they faced the culmination of every calculated move, every observation, every quiet patience that had brought them here. Amara stepped into the center of the room, letting the eyes of the elite settle on her. No longer invisible, no longer at the mercy of whispers, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. Names, secrets, and truths that had been hidden from the world were now illuminated. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Former detractors shrank under the weight of exposure, while unexpected allies shifted closer, revealing their loyalties in subtle, deliberate gestures. The balance of power reversed again, but this time it was decisive. Recognition, respect, and a sense of justice intertwined in a single, undeniable moment of triumph. Seojin remained at her side, his gaze steady. Yet in his eyes she saw not just admiration, but calculation. Every ally, every opponent, and every observer had been measured and weighed. And Amara realized that while the gala had been the stage, the real battle was in the consequences of truth. For the first time that night, Amara allowed herself a full breath, feeling the surge of release that comes with strategy fulfilled and peril narrowly avoided. The thrill of vindication intertwined with a subtle, growing warmth as Seojin's presence anchored her confidence. Their shared glance carried more than acknowledgement. It carried a quiet understanding of danger survived, stakes navigated, and trust cautiously forged. The tension of the evening, the fear, the exhilaration, the whispered judgments, coalesced into a moment of emotional clarity. Victory was not just about recognition or power. It was about integrity, courage, and the choices one makes when visibility meets consequence. The shadowed figures on the balcony finally moved, stepping forward into light. Recognition struck Amara. They were not enemies, but players whose allegiance had been misjudged. One figure bowed subtly, acknowledging her authority, while the other offered a nod of respect tinged with caution. The almost reveals the whispered warnings, the cryptic envelope. All had been tests of judgment, resilience, and strategic insight. Amara had passed. She was no longer merely visible. She had earned her place in this world of influence, power, and subtle danger. Yet beneath the triumph lingered the truth that not every story ends neatly. The gala was over, the immediate threats neutralized, but the currents of influence, ambition, and unseen agendas remained, flowing beneath the surface, waiting. As Amara prepared to leave the ballroom, the envelope, now empty save for a small slip tucked in its corner, revealed one final note. Tonight was only the beginning. What comes next will demand more than courage. It will demand your heart, your mind, and your choices. Be ready. Seojin's hand tightened briefly on hers, a silent acknowledgement of the truth in those words. Somewhere in the glittering crowd, unseen and patient, new eyes had already taken note of her emergence. And for Amara, the realization was chilling yet invigorating. The victory of tonight was tangible, undeniable, but it was only a prelude to the challenges still waiting beyond the gala, beyond recognition, beyond even what she dared to imagine. The chandeliers glimmered above, casting shadows that hinted at mysteries still unresolved. Amara took a final glance around the room, breath steady, mind sharp, heart alive. The game was far from over, and in the quiet, calculated stillness of the gala's aftermath, she understood that survival, influence, and redemption were only the opening moves of a far larger story.